Well, let's talk about this with Scott Lucas, Professor of International Politics at the Clinton Institute at University College Dublin. Good morning to you, Scott.
Julia.
You know, I think since I first started to talk radio, then just TalkTV back in March 2016, you and I have regularly discussed Donald Trump. You're not a fan. I'm not a fan. A lot of people are. A lot of people are getting in touch saying, look, these are, for want of a better phrase, trumped-up charges. This is a political indictment. This is about stopping a man who was president that the Democrats never accepted and preventing him from becoming president again in the 2024 election. He's the front-runner for the Republican nomination, running neck and neck in polls against the sitting President Joe Biden, who defeated him in 2020. Is this a political conspiracy? Are these trumped-up charges in your view?
You know, Julia, this is not a day to celebrate. These are very serious charges, and they are linked to an alleged attempt to undermine the entire American system. This is not a day to express personal opinions about Donald Trump. He, like any American, is entitled to the presumption of innocence before being proved guilty, but it is also not the day to basically put out political spin and quite often misinformation to try to undermine the legal process. Start from the facts, Julia, and I think the easiest way for me to explain it to myself is that the indictment, 45 pages with detailed evidence, sets out a four-stage plan, allegedly by Trump and 6 co-conspirators. Stage 1, put out the claims of false, that this was a rigged election, of electoral fraud, even though they knew those claims were false. Stage 2, put pressure on state governors and legislatures to replace the legally elected Biden representatives with Trump's representatives. When that failed, Stage 3, get the Justice Department to throw out the election, again, with the false claims of electoral fraud. Yep. Stage 4, and this brings us to the Capitol attack on January 6th, get Mike Pence to prevent Congress from certifying Joe Biden as the winner by installing Trump's fake electors. When Pence refused to do this, Donald Trump called on his supporters to go down to the Capitol and do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, he did. There's no doubt at all some of his words. He certainly fueled that anger. Talking about you have to fight to take back your country or you'll lose your country. A lot of that language is alleged by this indictment that it fueled that anger, it fueled the attack, and also that he exploited it by refusing to urge rioters to stop. But we know also from people who were inside the White House, his own family members, his closest aides, begging him to actually go make a public statement, which he eventually did many hours later, telling people to go home and that they weren't doing it in his name. Of course, there were people with Trump flags, people who'd gone from his rally to the Capitol building. And I think many people, I remember tweeting about it the night it started, just thinking, oh, wow, what's going on there? And well, it's all going off. And then realising how serious it was. And there were some quite amusing photos that came out early on, but then you realise quite how serious it was. 5 people lost their lives, heart attacks and things like that. So, but 140 police officers injured. The people working in that building, senators, congresspeople, they genuinely were fearing for their lives. This was a very serious affair. People saying it's a riot, saying it's out of control. Some people saying this was insurrection. Now, Donald Trump has called the Justice Department's Jack Smith as deranged. This was in messages he put on his social media page just before this announcement. He said, I hear that deranged Jack Smith, in order to interfere with the presidential election 2024, will be putting out yet another fake indictment of your favourite president. Why didn't they do this 2.5 years ago? Why did they wait so long? Because they wanted to put it right in the middle of my campaign. Prosecutorial misconduct is what he's calling it. Now, this is the thing. He is already facing charges in Miami over these highly classified documents that he kept at Mar-a-Lago. He's facing 37 charges related to falsifying business records in New York. He's also got this civil case. He's countersuing E. Jean Carroll over her allegation that he'd raped her in the 1990s. She won the case against him in terms of he was found not guilty of rape but guilty of sexually assaulting and defaming her. There's also a possibility of a criminal case in Georgia regarding his call to the Attorney General saying, can you find me some votes, and other allegations there. There's a whole array of charges involving, just huge swathes of different activities, from his own private business to his own private, sexual morality, to these charges involving, the Constitution, undermining, people's, votes, creating false votes is the charge, but also of trying to undermine genuine votes and not count them and not certify them. Is it possible that he can, for want of a better phrase, get away with all of this? Or is this whole... The number of charges against him just makes it impossible for him to defeat it all?
First of all, the legal position, Julia, is that even though Donald Trump is indicted in 3 cases, probably a 4th, even though he faces more than 80 felony counts, he can run for president. Even if he is convicted in some or all of these cases, he can run for president.
Yeah.
Even if he's convicted, he can claim the White House in January 2025, although we do not know at this point whether he can be disqualified from holding office, because at that point he may be facing prison. That's the unknown that we get into.
But at that point, he just gives himself a presidential pardon.
That I don't think, most legal experts say that can't be done, Julia, because that was something that came up during the Trump-Russia scandals and during the Trump-Ukraine scandal. So, again, that's the unknown territory. I think what you're implicitly asking me is, can this man get elected again? And what I'm saying here is that, look, it's 6 months before the first Republican primary, first Republican caucus. It's a long road to the general election in November 2024. But there are some people who are dug in, come hell or high water, with Donald Trump. And you know, Julia, that no amount of facts, if someone is entrenched in a certain position, can shift them. The question is, are there enough of those people where he prevails over people like Ron DeSantis and Mike Pence?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no question. Mike Pence, his former vice president, he's been very critical. He said in a tweet this morning, our country is more important than one man. Our constitution is more important than any one man's career. On January the 6th, former President Trump demanded that I choose between him and the Constitution. I chose the Constitution, and I always will. I mean, I'm not a fan of Mike Pence, but at least he did the right thing on that occasion and has been denounced ever since. People were talking about, well, in that insurrection, January the 6th, trying to hang Mike Pence extraordinarily. And again, that wasn't stopped by his own president at that time. The thing is, there's a big difference, isn't there, between the Republican base and their support for Donald Trump and the Republicans widely and those independent voters who basically decide elections. Donald Trump could easily win the nomination, but even if he didn't win the nomination, he could still run as an independent, couldn't he? He's got the funding. His base are not letting up.
Well, I think, Julia, he rejected the possibility of running as an independent in 2016.
Well, and I think just because he says something doesn't mean he's going to stick
I know.
on it.
He could run as an independent, but it's a much higher bar to cross than if you got the Republican nomination. What I would probably tell you this is, Julia, is to go back to Mike Pence, there's a big shift between what Mike Pence and Ron DeSantis said over the previous indictments. There they said they thought the justice system was being inappropriately used.
Yeah.
You'll notice in this case, Pence and to an extent DeSantis are saying, no, this is serious. And that, I think, highlights the fact that there is a major split in the Republican Party now between the Trumpists and the rest. And that could have a serious effect on the party beyond 2024 and indeed on the entire American system.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, the key thing here is, I mean, this is incredibly damaging for the American democratic system and for the American justice system. It's so highly and politicised justice system, but also to have elections, again, it happened in 2016, the Hillary Clinton Democrats, they brought this on themselves. They questioned the legitimacy of that election. And then we see Donald Trump going even further, questioning the legitimacy of the 2020 election. We're probably going to see that again in 2024. The peaceful transition of power and the acceptance of defeat is fundamental to a functioning democracy. This is going to have a long-term impact on the country, isn't it?
You know, Julia, I've talked to you before, and I said it's the most serious moment for the United States since 1865, which was our Civil War. What happened in 2020, 2021 is that the American system held, and the good Americans supported the system against the Capitol attacks. And many of them do support, despite the white noise of social media, the political and the legal system. But here's the open question, and this goes beyond Donald Trump, and this goes beyond right versus left. Are there enough decent, tolerant Americans out there who believe, I don't want a system that simply works, I win all the time. I want a system that wins for everybody by respecting the legal and political process, which has stood in place for almost 250 years. Yeah. My head says, it's a serious crisis. My heart says there's enough good Americans out there that, we'll get through this. Yeah,
well, we shall see. And good Americans, I would say, on both sides of the political divide there. Absolutely. Scott Lucas, great to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us.